I'm really pleased that you could all be here today for Let's Talk Tools, utilizing Zoom in speech language teleintervention. So teleintervention has become a much bigger part of our lives in the last year than it was perhaps for many years before this. Being able to use it fluidly and smoothly is really important, and that's what we're going to look at today, ways that we can engage our students using Zoom. I'll just briefly go over Patent's mission. The mission of Patent is to support the efforts and initiatives of the Bureau of Special Ed and to build your capacity to serve students who receive special education services. And we all know, as speech people, we are a big part of the special education community. So I'm so glad you could all come here and gather together to learn some new skills. Next, we also recognize that our goal for each child is to ensure that IEP teams begin with the general education setting with the use of supplementary aids and services first before considering a more restrictive environment. So we do uphold PD's commitment to LRE. All right, I want to talk about Zoom controls really briefly. Now, Zoom is a strange animal in that our Zoom could look very different from each other's. However, we usually start Zoom sessions as a participant with these controls. You will notice that you have the ability to mute and unmute, to start a video. There's an invite link. Typically, you wouldn't use that. This meeting has closed participation, so we probably won't do that. A participant's icon is there. Share screen, which I have made it possible for my participants to share screen because that is something I would do for my speech students as well. There's a chat window and then a button that says record. We are recording this session. So you will be able to possibly log in later and get this information again, should you want it. The reason why I orient all participants to the controls is because this is a good thing to do with students when they first begin Zoom. I would allow them maybe a couple minutes to just play around with these, to stop and start their video, to mute themselves and unmute, because it gives them power over the controls and makes them feel like they are in charge. I also put in a slide here about troubleshooting. So again, troubleshooting is a great thing to share with your students or with their parents. What are the steps we use for troubleshooting? Well, number one is reconnect to the Zoom meeting. If you get kicked off, log back in again. If something's not working, log back in again. If you're finding you have a repetitive problem when you're logging in, reboot the computer, and that usually will fix most issues. You can, if it's the case of audio clipping or you can't see my screen or something, send a question to me in the chat log and I will be able to remedy that problem. If you're experiencing audio clipping and no one else is, try joining by phone. This is something that your students might have to do if the bandwidth of their internet connection does not support that kind of live stream audio. So that's often very helpful to students and parents. And then if you have it, you can contact local tech assistants and go from there. All right, our goals for today. Today, we're going to explore engagement strategies for Zoom. And we're also going to give you some opportunities to network with your fellow SLPs to learn some tips and tricks about using Zoom with kids in speech teleintervention. So I did want to go ahead and take a poll and figure out who's in the room. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that now. It's just a couple of questions long. So you should see the poll and be able to view the questions. So we'll just wait for some people to log their responses. There are two questions here. With which grade levels do you work with most often? I know you guys might work with all the grade levels, but try to pick the one you use the most often. And then what kind of instruction is your school currently using? And we'll give people a few minutes to answer that. Now, if you note on your PowerPoint over on the left-hand side under who's in the room, there is a hyperlink that says polling. This is a direct connection to the Zoom tutorials you can use to create polls. So that is there for you. And you'll notice as we go through the session, I have a lot of hyperlinks in here that will take you directly to the Zoom tutorials. Okay, We've got 9 out of 10 having voted, which is pretty successful for a poll. So we're going to end that and I'll share the results with you. All right, so if we take a look, looks like we're kind of evenly spread across the grades, quite frankly. We've got a couple people in early intervention, a few in K2, some 3 through 5 and 9 through 12. Nobody working with the middle schoolers, huh? Middle school is its own animal, so you got to get a very special person to deal solely with middle school. So no middle school SLPs right now. And then it looks like most of you are doing hybrid right now. One person is all in person, and then a couple are other. If you want to share in the chat what other means, I'm going to open up the chat so I can see it. That would be awesome. So we get an idea maybe of what you are dealing with, and you can go ahead and enter that in when you get a chance. And it looks like nobody's doing all virtual. Now, one thing that we've learned a lot from our situation over the past, what is it now, 9 months almost, is that the situations could change at any time. So I'm sure we all remember when we were in school on March 13th, intending to come back to school the next Monday, and up all at once the schools closed. So even if you are doing all in person right now, learning about Zoom is still incredibly important. Because you never know when you may have to use it later for tele-intervention. And so let's see, Dana contributed to the chat. Oh, that she's doing all of the above. So she's got schools that are doing everything, full in-person, remote, cyber, hybrid, everything. And then Beth brought out a good point. Some of her students are doing hybrid, some are at home learners. Many schools have given choices with that. So you may be dealing with a lot of situations right now. All right, moving forward. So let's start to explore the features. There are a lot of basic tools within Zoom that we kind of take for granted. So we're going to talk about those a little bit at first, and then we're going to talk about how we tease out some of those features for individual students. All right, we start with cameras. So you may have never known this, but there is a great camera debate happening in the world. It's the cameras on versus cameras off. And I have actually worked with kids who have told me, oh, my last SLP, she wouldn't use the camera. So for whatever reason, not everyone is using cameras. Now, cameras are awesome. They build relationships. They help us observe each other. It's much better for pragmatics because we can view facial expressions. We can see what's going on with the child's eye contact. And for articulation, it does let us see our kids' mouths, which really helps, especially when we're over a virtual connection that might not always be really clear. So these are all good reasons to use your camera, but why wouldn't you use your camera? Well, camera may be distracting to some of your kids, especially if you're working with groups. They might kind of stare at what their peers are doing. Cameras do split bandwidth. So if you have students who don't have very fast internet speeds, cameras may just be too much for the live stream for them to participate in. We also have individuals who just aren't comfortable using a camera for whatever reason. They're afraid somebody's going to run behind them, or they, are just not comfortable with someone seeing in their house. So an alternative of this would be to use a still photo, which most of us, you can go into settings and just put a photo in there, and then it's much easier. We can just have that stored. All right. When we're looking at cameras, we might also think about, well, how do we want our background to look like? So in Zoom, you are able to create virtual backgrounds, and you use, if you wanted to try it right now, your little video icon. So I've indicated that down here. Just going to circle it for you. All right, sorry, I'm obviously not the best with the pen, but it gets the message across. So if you find your video icon right there, you can choose a virtual background. And you might want to keep in mind while you're doing this, do you have a green screen? Some computers have a green screen built in. My computer doesn't, so I literally have a green screen here, which if I wanted to share that with you, I can. So now you see what it looks like behind me. It's literally a green screen. It's something I always keep back there. But because I have it, I can share my virtual backgrounds. And sometimes it's interesting to children if I have a virtual background they didn't expect, like, I'm in the forest. What can we talk about with that? Or some of my kids really love when I'm in space. So that can be a fun way to just get some conversation flowing. If you are unsure of where to find your backgrounds, you do toggle over that video icon that you have on your participants controls. And if you go down to background and filters, or it might say virtual backgrounds, you will be able to choose your background that you want to use. And the nice thing is you can kind of pick new ones of these every day if you want to, and you would just select them here. You might want to also you'll have to mark if you have a green screen, and that will make that work. Okay, moving forward. All right, screen sharing. Screen sharing is a great tool to use with kiddos because they really like showing you what they were working on, right? You should probably consider when you're working with individuals or groups whether you would like them to be able to screen share. I always leave it on, especially with individuals. Now, with groups, it could be a little more tricky because you'd be toggling between screens, which can be confusing. But for individual students, it's a really good idea. You do need to remember that you'll be able to end your share, or you need to end your share for others to be able to share. So if you're the host, I'm sharing right now, nobody else can share unless I stop my share and give them that power. And then they'll be able to do so. When you're sharing your screen, you also want to think about how you're going to change your screen shares. These are sometimes things you have to practice so you can be fluid at them. So for example, I might want to share a new screen because I want my student to work on their Poplet, right? So I've put my screen up here and now they can work on their Poplet. Now I have certain controls built within Poplet that I can use to make this bigger or smaller, right? However, not all windows are going to be able to do that. So I might have a screen share where I want to do an advanced share. Okay, so I'm actually going to pull up something different here. All right. So let's say I want to share a screen with you all that has a game. And I'm going to let you choose from several games here. But looking at it now, this is simply too tiny. You can't really see it very well. So I can actually do an advanced share that zooms in, which actually is not available on my computer right now because I'm actually going off of Beth's PowerPoint. So my advanced share is not bringing that up. I'm going to show it to you in a screenshot though, as to what it would look like. So as I said, the fun part about Zoom is figuring out what's on each account. Right, so this is what it looks like. Well, if we're doing advanced screen sharing, which looks like this, you can actually go to advanced and hit portion of screen. And what this will do is if your screen's particularly busy, you can hone in on one area of it. I've seen this work really well for students perhaps who have autism and who are really hyper aware of all that is happening on the screen. If we want them to just look at one thing and not see maybe our controls or not see all the aspects of the picture, we're just going to look at one part. Advanced screen sharing is really useful. If you want to just do a basic share, you would see all your windows coming up, able to be shared. But you always want to remember that if you also want to share sound, you need to check the box for share computer sound. If you don't do that and you try to show a video, like maybe you want to show your Peachy Speechy or your speech sounds video, you better have your computer sound in there. So that is something to watch out for. You'll notice as I'm going through the presentation, I use the pen a lot. I use Annotate all the time. Annotate is a great tool. The therapist can do it, but also the students can do it. So we all have access to Annotate, and that means we can draw on the screen. And we'll be talking about that a little more later. Now, there are times that you might have to go into your settings for Zoom in order to get things you want, such as screen sharing. So this is an example of the screen sharing setting menu that you might have. So you notice on here that right now I have only one participant can share at a time. I always leave that on because if multiple people can share, it's really confusing and you really need to have dual monitors to make it work. And I don't have that at home. I have it in the office, but not at home. Now I've made this so all participants can share. But if you didn't want to do that, maybe you're with a group of people you don't know, you really can't see that they're going to have to share anything with you, you can mark only host, and that would go ahead and allow only you to share your screen. All right, moving forward. Now, those are basic features for Zoom that we would use with anybody. We'd use those with individuals. We'd use them with groups. We would use them with adults we might be interacting with on Zoom or with students. Everybody uses those. There are a few more features, some of which gravitate more towards individual engagement and some of which are better for groups. So we're going to take a look at those. And by all means, if you guys have any questions or want to see anything again, please let me know and I will go ahead and help you with that. So one thing that is a great tool for working with individuals is remote control. Remote control allows a student to access your screen. So students, when they're able to do this, are first of all empowered because they're taking a hand in their own therapy. It's important to them. They have a role in it. And they're also much more engaged. Now, I will warn you a couple things. One, remote control works differently depending on whether you are on an iOS device or a laptop, a tablet, a phone, a laptop, right? I have seen remote control work fantastic on laptops. It works okay on iPads. So if you're using a tablet device, you can usually click on things with remote control, but you can't always click and drag, which is sometimes necessary. On a phone, they typically don't work at all. So there are those students, and I'm sure we've all experienced it, who try to get on their phone to do their speech session. Now that's not great for a lot of reasons. One, because it's so tiny anyway, and anything you're going to show them is going to be hard to see. But also these tricks will not work on there, like remote control. All right, so let's say I want to share my screen with somebody and I'm going to give them remote control. Okay, so I'm going to pull up a game and I'm going to switch my screen share so you can see my game. Okay, it's on there, good to go. And I'm making sure that I have checked the share computer sound box because I really want to share that. All right. So here's my game. Now, in the event that I want somebody to be able to control my game, I'm going to give them control. So I'm actually giving Beth control of my screen right now. So Beth is now able to hit the controls on my screen, which I am not doing. Now, I always tell my kids, when I get to a screen like this is my job. I'm going to be using this screen. Now, if Beth tries to take the mouse from me, which she is doing right now, then I have to take it back. So I actually have it set on a keystroke that I can take back the screen, remote control. And so Beth has not defeated me. You know, she tried, but I was able to get control back. And then we might have a conversation about that. And when she's ready to have control back, I can give it to her. Now, in this case, Beth could pick her car that she wants to drive, and I might want to pick my car. She kind of stole control so I can pick my car. And we would go back and try again. So you notice in this case, Beth would be able to do everything on the screen, like hit the spinner. And you would hear the computer sound because I have shared that with her. And then she could move her little car the number of spaces she wants. Yeah, now this works because she is on a laptop. If she was doing this on an iPad, she probably could do the spinner, but not click and drive the car. It really just depends on what you have going on as far as the device the students are using. And just with the keystroke, I've taken that control away from Beth. We'll go back to our PowerPoint. Whoop. It does take a long time to get fluid with switching between screens, and it's always going to take you at least some amount of control. Um, and some amount of time to do that. So in the event that it takes a long time, you might want to use that opportunity to make small talk with your kids if that's something they're working on, get to know them, talk about things you know are motivating, because it can take a couple seconds. All right, so remote control, we saw that we can use it for games. You can also use it just to point to objects on the screen, because sometimes a student will say to me, oh, what is that? I want to know more about that, but I have no idea what they're talking about. And the funny thing is they'll often point, but I can't tell where you're pointing just by looking at your screen. So it's a great way for them to just be able to point out what they want to talk about. They could also use it to flip a page. So if I set up a student on, say, Epic Books or something like that, they could use this feature to turn the page themselves. And again, it's allowing them some control. And Beth has put in the chat a link to Zoom keystrokes. Thank you so much. And I am going to talk about keystrokes a little later, because there's actually millions of them, depending on what you need them for. That's the one I really like, but there's a lot of them. All right, Whiteboard. Whiteboard is another engaging feature that is built into Zoom. So Whiteboard is kind of like a Padlet that's in Zoom. Now, it's clunkier and a little more difficult to use than some of those sites that are dedicated just to brainstorming. So if you use Padlet or MindMeister or something like that, those are made for brainstorming. They have lots of nice little features that you can use to organize data. Whiteboard does not have that. And once something's on Whiteboard, it's there forever unless you deliberately erase it. You can't move it around. It is stuck. Right? So I am going to share Whiteboard with everyone in just a moment. Just be aware, though, that if you want to save anything on Whiteboard, like say you and your students have created something, you can only save it depending on your settings. You have to make your settings allowable to save Whiteboard, and it depends on your version of Zoom. Some of the versions, if you have maybe a lower one, don't have the latest update, you're not able to save these. So just something to note. All right, so I'm going to do a new share and share my whiteboard with you. And Whiteboard is located just in a basic share. It's something that you might use on a regular basis. Now, there are a lot of different ways you could use Whiteboard, and I'm sure just brainstorming right now, you could think of several. Sometimes I do something as basic with Whiteboard as put up two rectangles and say, this is what we need to do today. Practice speech sounds and describe pictures. What are we going to do first? And then my student can either answer by using an annotate. They could put a star in the thing that they want to do. And usually they'll put like 1,000 stars, you know, because kids like that, which is okay in this case. Or they might verbally tell me, well, I want to do pictures first, or I want to do speech sounds. Then when this is done, I might cross it out. I know this is a really simple thing, but it is a good behavior management tool if you have kids that just want to know what they're getting through and what they have to do next. All right. Hold on one second. I was just taking a peek at the chat. Okay, so Julie mentioned that she's not had luck with student remote access on Chromebooks either. Yes, I've seen that as well. Chromebook, unfortunately, it wasn't built to be a system the same way a laptop does. It was built to be, you know, something you could do papers on. You can maybe participate in live streaming as a participant. But it wasn't really created for accessibility. It wasn't created for engagement. It was created for like this bare bones of this is what we're going to do. So I think that if your students are using Chromebooks, you are going to experience some difficulties with that. Do let me know, because I don't think I've had a student on Chromebooks. I've had a lot on iPads. If your students are using a Chromebook, Are they able to access anything remotely? Like, could they at least click on things? I'll just wait for you guys to answer in the chat. And as we're waiting for them to go ahead and give us some more background information, just pointing out the whiteboard can be used for anything that you would use paper and pencil for. So, you know, in speech, I'm sure you guys are writing down things all the time when you have a student in front of you. You're giving them cues that are perhaps written. Maybe you are doing sentence starters with them or working on segmentation and blend. All this can be done on whiteboard, though you do have to get used to it. Okay, so Julie's saying they can't even click on anything. Have you had any success having any of your students connect remotely, or are they all on Chromebooks? And I'll just wait for them to reply. Because it can also occur that remote control isn't checked on your settings too. Okay, of course they all have Chromebooks. That's something that I can look into more, but from my experience and the experience of others, Chromebooks are not going to be the best for using remote control. And that is really unfortunate. All right. So things you might want to do on whiteboard. Anything that you would want to write down. So I'm working with a student who has apraxia perhaps, and he is working on, instead of segmenting his words, which he tends to do, he's working on blending them. So I could do a lot of different things here. I could show that if I'm working on segmenting, this is two separate syllables, d, a, d, a, but we want to blend them into one. Day, day. So long versus short, and maybe even having them copy that on their body, day, to get that blended syllable. When you are working with whiteboard, you have to clear all the drawings, or you can erase them one by one. That's fine too. I've used whiteboard to have kids draw their speech machine. Now, usually, even if kids don't have a remote control, they usually have Annotate. So I've never had the experience of trying to use Annotate on a Chromebook. But if I would think they would be able to use that. So that might be a way that would allow them to use their, you know, their own tools, their Annotate tools, to go ahead and participate in something. So in the event that I perhaps have a fluency student and I might want to work on building my speech machine, and then usually I make jokes about my terrible drawing ability because my guy doesn't even have a round head. Okay, so I'm going to make this. And then I might have the student add in, okay, let's talk about the parts of the speech machine we're using to create sounds. And they might add, you know, a tongue, or they might point to the nose because that's important in nasals. So whatever it is that might help them understand the speech machine better, I can put that up there. And anything else you could draw would be up there. Like I said, I'm not a great artist, but this is a good way to just use a different cue for students, being able to use the pen. And I will point out that Annotate can write anywhere. It doesn't only write on the whiteboard. I can write on websites. I can write on whatever I am sharing at the time. And that's useful sometimes to point out to kids what they need to do. And it looks like Tammy has found an article about how to share control with a student who has a Google Chromebook. So write that down, because that might be a great thing for you guys to know. All right. Moving back to the PowerPoint. All right, Annotate. So Annotate was what I was using to draw. You can use stamps, you can use shapes. you can use it to draw attention to a specific area of the screen that you want to point out, or you could do it to perform activities like I did with the segmentation and blend. You could do alkaline boxes, whatever you're working on could be annotated. And Beth had informed me that a lot of students can't use this. There is actually a setting in Zoom where you can give all participants the ability to annotate. It's under settings, and I can attempt to get there now. So I have closed that share. I'm going to pull up a different one.
What I found was on Chromebooks.
Oh, it was on the Chromebook. So,
yeah,
okay.
For Zoom on the Chromebooks, that students do not have the annotate option.
Okay, so the Chromebooks really do seem to be causing us problems. If in the event your students are not using Chromebooks, a lot of these settings are included under the in-meeting settings. So this is my basic Zoom account. Now I have so many Zoom accounts. I have one for this job at Patton. I have another one for when I see speech kids, and I have another one for random other stuff I do, like church stuff or whatever. You'll find that each account could be a little different, both in your settings and in whatever administrative control you have for certain things. So you might even find that all of these are affected not only by the devices the students are using, but maybe by the permissions that your organizations have given you going into the therapy situation. And that really depends on what you've been given access to. But these would be some of those advanced settings that you might want to explore. Oop, I feel like, let me go to the settings. Yeah, it wasn't sharing with you for a moment. Not sure why. So if you pulled up your settings, you would be able to change some of these things on here. You can even customize things in advance, like the virtual backgrounds and things like that. You can allow reactions, remote controls. See, I have it checked. If you don't have it checked, you're not going to be able to share. And I also always check allow saving of whiteboard content in the event that I'd want to keep that. All right, going back to our PowerPoint. And that's really unfortunate that you can't use Annotate on Chromebooks, because it is really great. In that case, I might actually have the students just have a whiteboard and be able to write things down so I could see them, or to do activities. If there was anything I wanted them to be able to do via writing, I might go kick it low tech, you know, and have them use paper or whiteboard or something. Oh, and Beth wrote Google Drive. So yes, you could always use a Google Doc, and that's a great thing just to share with students all the time. A Google Doc is easily shared within the chat box. So typically if I'm sharing with a student, I would just stick the link in there. You do have to watch your permissions, right? So don't get stuck in the case where, oh, I shared my link with you, but you can't edit it. So make sure you make it a link that's permitted to be edited if you want students to be able to interact with you on it. But that is a great idea, Beth. All right. You could use annotation for a lot of things. Like I said, even off the whiteboard, like if you wanted to vote, how am I feeling today? Maybe I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm feeling happy, or even identify which one is upset and work on identifying that. So that's another thing you can do with Annotate. And I've had even very professional presentations use Annotate to make choices and then have people explain their choices. So it's a good tool to have. All right, and we talked a little bit about Zoom settings. You can get to Zoom settings two ways. You can do it via the web link zoom.us/meeting, which is how I get on a lot of the time. You can also get on through your Zoom app if you have a Zoom app on your laptop. So I have both. I enter a lot of times in through the website just because to me it's faster. I can just type that up. But you can use the app as well. And the app is where I actually found a few settings that I was not able to find on the actual Zoom Us meeting link. And one of those was keyboard shortcuts. So I put a screenshot up here of my keyboard shortcuts that I found. And I actually was going to try and see if I could get on the app for you too. Give me one moment. We experienced something earlier where we had to restart and some of the screens that I had up kind of disappeared, but that's how it is in the virtual world. All right, so I'm going to share a screen with you. Okay. One moment. All right. Okay, so that might actually be the one screen that I cannot share with you because Zoom is not letting me share its actual setting screen unless I share it from here. All right, so this is the setting screen. I typically go to keystrokes through the other setting screen, the one on my app. I think it's easier to utilize. So I'm going to show you my PowerPoint of that. And this is what the screenshot looks like when I'm on there. All right, so I mentioned that Zoom has just hundreds of keyboard shortcuts that you can use. The one that I really make sure that I have is the revoke remote control one, just so I can make sure that my students are not stealing my mouse away and that it's not a struggle. It should never be a struggle, right? If there are behaviors involved that make this too hard, we don't do it at that period of time. And honestly, I would say with all the students I've worked with, I have never had a problem with this more than once. No fighting over the mouse. They're mostly pretty great. They're happy to just be able to use it. But I like to keep this in my back pocket, and I do have my account set up to use the Alt-Shift-G in order to revoke control of the mouse. All right, I'm just going to check the chat because we have a couple. Oh, great. So Tammy has given us some resources about using Zoom with a digital whiteboard on Chromebook, which is awesome. And it also uses Jamboard. Right. Okay. So good resources in there. And thanks, Beth, for putting the to revoke remote control. It is Alt-Shift-G. It will be your best friend in the event that a student tries to take your mouse. Thank you guys so much. All right, we're going to look at a few more features now. So those are tools that I would use with individuals that I would be working with, and some of them I might use with groups as well. But there are a few tools that I think really gravitate towards group engagement. And one of them is participant reactions. So we talked earlier about how you have that participants bar on your controls. And you can usually hover over that, or you can hover over your own picture if you can find it. And it gives you some options to things that you can do. You can have reactions to things. So some of the reactions are more positive, like emotions, a laughing, a surprise. There's a hand clap if people are really excited about something. We also usually have a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a basic yes, no feature. Now, why would we want to use participant reactions? Well, it's an easy, fast way to get feedback. So if you want to see how you're feeling today, or take a vote. Okay, we want a yes, no on whatever we're doing. Do we want to play backgammon? Yes, no. It's very quick to get a response from that. And it can also be used to ask level of understanding, even like, did we get that? Did we feel good about that thumbs up? If you've got some kids doing thumbs down, we're going to have to work on that a little more because we want to make sure you understand it. So take some time right now and hover over your picture. And I'm going to ask you a question. Let's make it basic. Do you have a dog at home? See if you can locate yes, no, or thumbs up, thumbs down to answer that question. Do you have a dog at home? Julie has a dog. Who else? No one else. I know Tammy has a dog just because I know. But she's a co-host, so she probably can't put that up. All right. And then you can take those away as well. Participants can also raise their hands using that same feature, and that might be useful again, especially if you're in a group. You've got a group of 4 students. It's probably best if they be able to raise their hand to participate. Thank you. All right, breakout rooms. So breakout rooms let you form smaller groups. Now, why might this be important? Well, if you're working alone, you probably can't have a breakout room, right? Unless you want the kids to be able to be alone somewhere else, which is maybe not always a good use of your time. But you could use a breakout room in the event that you're working with a para, which does sometimes happen, or if you're working with another professional. Um, if you're working with the OT or something like that, or a school psychologist because you're doing a group learning environment. You could add them on as your second lead in the breakout room. That way you can both lead a small group. It's also a way to take out a smaller group. If you're working in a large classroom, like pushing into a classroom that's using Zoom, you can use the breakout room to pull out some kids that you want to do small group instruction. Okay, we have a question from Kristen. Is there a way to get more than raised hand, yes, no, go slower, faster in the participant grid? And she says that's all that she sees on her Zoom. Zoom is one of those entities that depending on the type that you have, it's only going to give you certain things. So you might only be able to use yes, no, go slower, faster, or raise hand. That just might be all you have an option to do. It depends on several factors. One, which version of Zoom you have. So try to get the latest updates if possible, because that's going to give you more features. They're always adding features. Some of them, they add them. Maybe there's a glitch. They fix them with the next update, but they're always putting new things on. So I would look there first. Next, you would need to look at your organization. So whether your organization is allowing some of those extra reactions like the emojis. I know with mine, I can't get the emotions personally because I have a basic account. So I can get yes, no, thumbs up. Um, I think I can do the clap hands, but it really depends. And it will depend on your students as well. So again, when you're doing that little Zoom tutorial, when you first start this, you might want to check, oh, what do you see when you look under reactions? If you hover over your face, what can you see? And that'll give you an idea of what they can use. So it's always good to find out beforehand. All right, polling. I did an example of polling earlier. So again, I wouldn't use polling with an individual student probably. I could just ask them something. But I might use polling with a group of students. And so polling can be used to vote. It can be used to check for knowledge. So if we are interested in demonstrating if we've learned a concept, it can be a quick formative assessment. We can use polling to explore our feelings, to self-assess, like if we ask the question, how comfortable do you feel with your fluency today? And then give them 4 options and just see on a scale what they have decided, because that might change the whole direction we go with our session. And we can also use polling to learn more about each other, to learn maybe what pets we have, or do we have any brothers and sisters at home? It's just a good way to get some of that information out in an engaging way. And it's pretty easy to share that with them. Now, you'd have to, of course, think of things like what's the reading level of my students. These are really good to do with like middle schoolers, teenagers that are going to be able to read the responses and provide knowledge about, each other as part of the responses.